the Harvard endowment. They've got $32 billion, but that apparently isn't enough. Jennifer, you got to help me understand this a little bit about how can that amount of money, they can have that amount of money in the bank and still be forced to cut back on things. I mean, how is that possible?
I think a lot of people are very surprised. They think if you have that much money, how could you possibly be still be feeling effects of the recession? But they are. They have this big endowment, but they get a lot of their operating income from it, and about 30% compared to most colleges, which is about 15%. And that endowment took a big hit in the recession and has not fully recovered.
Okay, we got a full screen here to show reliance on endowments, and you can see that it's lower at this point. Now, what's interesting, you mentioned in your story today on A3 in the Journal, it's a great story. The key number here is that Harvard's operating revenue per year, they may have a $32 billion endowment, but they actually spend over $3 billion a year. This is such a massive operation, this university. They spend over $3 billion a year just to keep it running.
That's right. And a few years ago, they started to look at where they were spending a lot of money. And there was a task force that found that they were spending $160 million a year on their libraries. So you can see where they do spend a lot of money. It's Harvard, and they want the best.
Yeah, you mentioned that
you know, they were building a big science center, and some of these things, when the recession hit, they had to scale back.
You mentioned that with the libraries. So some of the things they're scaling back, they're consolidating the libraries, they're cutting back on academic journal subscriptions, which can be very, very expensive. You mentioned up to $40,000 for some of these subscriptions.
Yes, that's right. They found that they were spending $3.75 million a year on academic journal subscriptions.
Wow. And so what are some, besides that in the libraries, are there any other cuts that Harvard is being forced to make?
They still have not filled a lot of the faculty positions that they cut. They are kind of reorganizing. They used to just have all these separate departments for IT. They've consolidated a lot of that. They had started to build a big science center in the downturn, and they are going to resume that, but it's going to be about half the size, and the construction won't start till 2014. So I was talking with someone from the city of Boston who deals with universities when they're expanding, and he said it used to be sort of a sky is the limit attitude over there, and now it's definitely changed.
It reminds me, I got to say, Jennifer, a little bit, we were talking earlier today about really the housing, the credit bubble, only in the sense that you have examples of folks back then basically just overextending themselves, buying too much house than they could afford in the long run. Here we have universities buying too much physical plant, buying too much really commitments forward, and they're not able to support all of them. Let's also talk about, is this really limited to Harvard, or talk about Yale or maybe Princeton or some of the other Ivy Leagues? What's their experience been?
Very much the same, because these universities do rely on their endowment for operating income. In good times, that works for them, because then they don't have to just raise tuition all the time. They don't have to add in more students. So they can keep that steady, and they can avoid a lot of the pressures that some other schools might have about funding shortfalls from other sources. So that seems to work for them. But then it also ties them more to their investments. So when the stock market goes down, the income to the university will go down, and you'll see big drops in the money that they're getting, and they have to cut back. And then people think, well, they have this big endowment, and they can, why can't they just sort of dip in there? But actually, a lot of the money is restricted. So when people give it to Harvard, they say, I want it for the School of Engineering faculty chair or whatever, and you can't just use that then for staff expenses.